everyone. We'll be discussing about financial lease. This is what we have been given. The firm has entered a long-term lease contract for a machine. The lease term is 6 years. Annually, the firm will pay $5,000 at the end of each year. The effective interest rate is 7.5%. So this rate is actually stated on the lease, and we are making some annual payments, and we're going to find out the present value of the cash flow. We'll see what our obligation is. I'll show you what's going on once we jot down some numbers, then it becomes clear as to what's happening. So let's see what happens here. It says annually the firm will pay $5,000. Let's find out the present value of these cash flows. This is how you find this divided by 1 plus, what's the effective interest rate? 1.075 raised to 1. So you can see $23,469 is the present value of this machine, or in other words, you can say $23,469 is the present value of these payments. So what happens is when a company leases something, it has an obligation because it has to pay. So your liabilities or your obligation has increased by $23,469. Okay. So if your liabilities have increased, your assets also have increased. Remember, your assets equals to liabilities plus equity. So if your assets are increasing, in order for this equation to be balanced, your liabilities also should be increasing. So in this example, our liabilities are increasing because we have an obligation, and in our balance sheet we have a liability, and we also have an asset over here. So our goal right now here is to reduce our liability to 0. So at the beginning of time 1, we have $23,469 $23,469 as our obligation. So in the previous videos and every time I emphasize that whenever we have an obligation or something, we have to pay an interest on that. Okay, so that's the carrying value. So that's the value of our asset. So when we actually pay off this lease, our liability is gonna go to 0. And what we're gonna do with this asset is we're gonna depreciate the asset to 0 over its useful life. And we'll see that in a moment what's happening. So we have this obligation, so we're gonna pay an interest expense on that. So this times 0.075, that's your interest, 0.075. This is our interest expense, but in the lease terms they're saying we have to pay $5,000. all right, but there's a reduction in obligation because you're paying 5,000 and your expense is 1,760. So you subtract this from this, and you have effectively paid 3,239. So your liability is reduced because you have effectively paid this. This is your interest expense, and this is your payment. So you subtract your beginning value with the payment that you have made, this reduces your obligation. So you can see that at the end of year one, you only have an obligation of $20,000 and $20,229. $20,229.18. So the present value beginning will be this. The beginning year two value gonna be equal to the ending year one value. You'll see this in many instances. The ending value at year one will be equal to the beginning value of year two. Then again, we have an obligation year. We haven't paid this, so we need to pay an interest. Times, what's our interest? Is 0.075. Okay, but you're making an annual payment of 5,000. What's happening is there's a reduction obligation because your interest expense is this and you're paying this. So effectively what's happening is you have paid this amount. Your obligation or your beginning book value is now being reduced by this amount because you've paid this. And this ending book value of year two will become the beginning book value of year three, and you have an interest expense of 0.075, and you can just calculate and see what happens. If our obligation has not gone down to zero, that means we have made some mistake, and we'll see where we did our mistake. Okay, so you can see it's almost zero because there's some rounding errors. That's why we have this problem, but we can try to fix it. Let me just see what happens. Yes, it's some rounding. Let me just format this. Counting. Now here you see we had to format it. Okay, so your obligation has gone down to zero. You don't owe anything, and you remove your assets and you have paid off your liability. At the end of year six, you have no more obligation, so you close the books, and that's pretty much about it. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave some feedback. Thank you.